What's good, y'all? It's Drew here, back with another video. Today, I'm gonna be talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender and its case for GOAT. I know what y'all about to say. Y'all gonna be like, "Ayo, Andrew, Avatar: The Last Airbender is not an anime," and you're correct. Avatar: The Last Airbender is not an anime. It never has been an anime. But with that being said, Avatar: The Last Airbender is the exception to the rule. First things first is question of the day. Question of the day is, did you watch Avatar? And if you didn't, why not? And part two of that question is, if you watched Avatar, who's your favorite character in Avatar? So for me, I don't want to go super obvious, but my favorite character in Avatar is gotta be Zuko, bro. Zuko's such a great character. And like, I feel like this is an anime channel, right? But Zuko would fit perfectly in a lot of anime. Like just his character arc, Zuko's character arc is what a lot of animes strive to do. So shout out Zuko and shout out obviously Avatar. The reason why I had to make this video was because I think Avatar: Last Airbender is, without a doubt, the best cartoon of all time. That's non-negotiable. I wasn't even gonna like argue that. There's no time in the video to argue that. It just is. But, you know, my channel's about anime, as you know. And in my opinion, I think that usually anime reach higher heights than, you know, other fictions or other, you know, sources of media. I think you're the best anime of all time. It's probably better than most movies, most TV shows, most cartoons, all that. But Avatar can really hang with any of them. So the anime cases for GOAT series, the best way to describe it is, if you wanted to call this anime the GOAT, what would its biggest strengths be? So Avatar ain't an anime, but it dang near is. So, you know, with Avatar, I think pretty non-negotiable. Avatar's best like skill set, or you know, its biggest strength, it's just the character development. So when we talk about character development, I'm talking about everyone. We're introduced to a small cast of characters, right? Team Avatar. So we have Aang, Toph, Sokka. Toph's a little bit later on, obviously, but Katara. Later on we get Zuko. So that's a really good cast. In anime, main characters hold a lot of weight. The reason of that is simple. It's because you see them day in and day out, episode in, episode out. So if they're not interesting, or they're not cool, or we don't relate to them, it's just not gonna be as good. You can really not find an anime where the characters are really, really good in general, but the main characters are trash. It just doesn't happen that way. In Avatar, like, Avatar's characters, bro, like Avatar's characters, they're just so excellent. So we're gonna start with the main character, the Avatar, Aang. Aang goes from a little kid who obviously he's not trying to fight, you know, an immature kid. He goes from a normal 11, 12-year-old kid to being confident enough to help lead the war, being strong enough to hang with Firelord Ozai for a long time. Like, the character development on these characters, it's almost unworldly, bro. If we don't talk about character development, I can't not talk about Zuko. I just can't not do that. Zuko has arguably the best character development of anything. Like, I'm not of anything, period. You take Zuko, who's this, you know, crazy, revenge-driven 16-year-old who just wants to get his honor back, honor, and you turn him to one of the most likable characters in the show, and there's no point in the series when it feels forced. We're talking about in 3 seasons, you take Zuko and you learn about his history, you know, the backstory. We find out through his family tree why he's acting the way he is. When Iroh tells him, "Ayo, the reason you're acting this way is because your mother's grandfather was Roku, but your father's grandfather was Sozin, and they were going at each other back and forth. So obviously you gonna have this struggle, this internal struggle in your body." And we can see with Azula, she kind of crazy too, so you know, she dealt with it as well. It's almost unfathomable how he was able to take these characters and make them so relatable. Like, for instance, Katara. We see her internal struggle of, one, not having her father around, and not having her mother around. And we see Sokka and we see Katara, and they're both siblings, right? But they play different roles, and they struggle with not having their parents in their life in different ways. So with Sokka not having his father around meant that he had to be the man. So he's like, all right, I'm a man up, and women and stuff need to be protected. And that's why early on, Sokka was misogynistic. Sokka walked so Future could run. Sokka viewed it as women are weaker people, and they need to be protected by men. And the show went out of their way to show him that that wasn't correct, which is why he learned and, you know, changed his attitude towards it. But that's how he started. And that was based on him not having a father. And him not having a mother, that's the role that he didn't have to take. You want to know why? Because Katara took that role. Katara played the mother for pretty much the entire series. We see later on in the series when Team Avatar are having struggles, who's the one who's, whipping them into shape? It's Katara. When Katara and Toph had their beef, why was there beef there? Because Toph was a rebellious kid and Katara was the mother. And she was like, straighten up. And Toph's like, you're not going to tell me what to do. And they fought. Obviously, they didn't actually throw hands, but you know what I'm saying. We see towards the end of the episode, Sokka says it himself. He's like, it's been so long since I see my mom, I can't even remember her face. When I close my eyes and try to remember her face, all I see is Katara. Because Katara plays the mother role. The creators of Avatar, he showed how the same struggle can be split 2 different ways. And that's just like, whoa. If you want another parallel like that, there's Jet. Shout out my man Shaq. Shaq's one of the people on the 301 Reacts that I'm a part of. Obviously, if you don't know about it, check it down below. Link's gonna be down below for sure. Check that out. But his favorite character is Jet. The reason why Shaq's favorite character is Jet is because Jet's struggle was realistic. Now, people might say it's unrealistic, but the reason why Jet's such an interesting character in this aspect is because when you look at the struggle of Jet and you look at the struggle of Sokka and Katara, they had the same struggle in the sense that their family structure was damaged by the Fire Nation. Like I told you before, Sokka and Katara had different reactions to their struggle or, their trauma. Well, Jet had a completely different reaction to both of them. Katara and Sokka, they don't like the Fire Nation. We know that. But they didn't view everything as antagonistic as Jet did. Jet had a similar thing happen to him. His parents were both killed by a Fire Nation soldier. Like, in front of his eyes, he saw it. And Jet's realization was, all right, all Fire Nation, y'all all bad. I can't trust y'all. I want all Fire Nation guys gotta die. And that's very drastic if you didn't know. That's very crazy. Jet showed us that 3 people can have the same thing happen to them, and they can have different outlooks and conclusions. Like, the conclusion that Jet had was completely different from the conclusion that Sokka and Katara had. Just on a different wavelength. So when we're talking about characters, character development, just overall making compelling, realistic, real characters, oh, Avatar, lock and key. It's so much to the point that, like, when we were getting towards the end of the show, we could predict what the character would do or wouldn't do almost to the T based off of their character. Like, oh, this is a great one. So, shout out Zuko. When Zuko was good, season 3. Zuko is having these, I want to say, Zuko missions where he takes one of the team avatars and, helps them with a trauma or something in their past or something, right? And he goes with Katara because Katara had some underlying trauma that she hadn't dealt with her mom. So they went out to find, the person who killed Katara's mom. In the end, Katara does not kill him. And she's like, all right, revenge is not the answer. It's not worth it. And it's like, okay, we knew beforehand that Katara, we knew that Katara had some overlying, like, vengeance, but we knew at the end of the day Katara's like a kind soul. But my favorite part about the episode, basically when at the end, Katara tells Aang that he was right, like that vengeance is never the answer. And Zuko's like, yeah, you're right. So I got one question for you. What are you going to do when you have to fight the Firelord? And the episode just ends. And, like, that's a question that, honestly, I think up until pretty much then, it kind of got scooted to the side or the back. It's like, we just gonna beat the Firelord and we gonna be good. But as we got closer to the date, it's like, bro, how are we gonna defeat the Firelord? Like, are you gonna kill him? Like, what's gonna happen there? And we knew Aang, no matter what happened, we knew Aang would not pull the trigger. Obviously, metaphorically, we knew Aang would not kill Ozai. We knew that. When we're talking about goated characters in Avatar, honestly, a shorter list in Avatar is what characters are not goated. That's the shorter list. Because when you're talking about Zuko's character development, beautiful. Aang's, beautiful. Katara's, beautiful. Toph, underrated, beautiful. Iroh doesn't have a character development, right? But I think people misunderstand that. Well, most Avatar fans don't, but some people misunderstand that some character arcs don't have to, move. It's called like the static character arc, in which they don't change. That character doesn't change. The character changes things around them instead of vice versa. And Iroh was the epitome of that. Because Iroh, we never saw Iroh change from where he was, episode 1 to episode, I don't know when Avatar ended, episode 60 or something. We never saw a change. We had a flashback when, Iroh was a little bit more mischievous and was, evil, but we didn't see Iroh ever change. Instead, we saw Iroh help Aang develop, help Zuko develop for 3 seasons, Toph develop, Katara, like, Iroh was just a pot of knowledge and wisdom. Like, shout out Iroh. But obviously, you know, as good as the characters are, there has to be more to a series or an anime than just characters. But don't worry, Avatar got some more for you. We got some heat. Don't worry, we still got some heat left. This is gonna go hand in hand, but you know, the world building, that has to matter, right? Because these characters can be as good as you want them to be. They can be perfect, but if the world building if the world's not built up nice, who cares? You have these diverse characters in this bland place. Don't worry though, Avatar did it to the T. Obviously, there are four, main domains of shadow domains. There are four main domains of areas, right? Because for each element, because obviously each element is based off of a different culture, and so since it's based off a different culture, they live in different areas. Obviously, it's a bit segregated in that sense. We start more in the Water Tribe, right? Because we see it starts with Katara and Sokka, and we see Aang, right? But then switch. We in the Fire Nation now. All right, a couple episodes, maybe a season later, Earth Kingdom. The way Avatar was able to flesh out the world and make it feel real is super commendable. There's a reason I'm putting world building and power systems together. And the reason I'm doing that is because Avatar did it in such a great way in that the power systems are not only realistic, but each power system is based off of culture, like I said before. Each bending, because there's four elements. I probably should have said that a long time ago. But there are four elements, right? So there's earth, fire, water, and air. And each element has, people that go with it. So, air, the air nomads. Water, the water tribe, the people from the water tribe. Fire, Fire Nation. Earth Kingdom. Not only they have different, domains, different areas where they live, it's a different culture with each place. So the way the people in the Earth Kingdom live is completely different from the way that the air nomads lived. It's almost night and day. And because of that, when they use their elements, it's completely different. So the way Aang and Toph fight, they couldn't be more different. Even looking at the way they dress, it's something as simple as the way they dress. When Sokka's fighting against Master P and Dao, the reason why Master P and Dao knew Sokka was from the Water Tribe was because of his name. He's like, bro, Sokka, that's not a Fire Nation name, bro. Look at how they dress. Look at how Sokka and Katara were dressed in episode 1. And look at how they had to change their clothing when Aang was in the Fire Nation, when they were basically infiltrating almost. Look at the difference in the clothing. Like, they just dress differently. You can just see the different cultures. Look at how the Fire Nation does things. We're talking about the Firelord, every pass down. The Air Nomads didn't have anything like that. The Water Tribe didn't have anything like that. It's just so, it makes the world so vast. It's like, bro, y'all don't miss. Like, Avatar, they just don't miss. Like, that's really the takeaway. They don't miss. And I think a great character that really pushed the power system and world building forward was Iroh. You're gonna see a lot of Iroh praise on this video because Iroh is probably the best character in Avatar. Iroh, Zuko, one of the two. Iroh learned to redirect lightning. Now, lightning is a subset of fire, right? The way Iroh learned how to redirect lightning was by studying the four nations, specifically how the Water Nation moves with the flow, like water. And he learned that and used that technique, or used that, that skill set or that move, that mindset, and had the lightning move through him. And that's why Iroh can redirect lightning. When Zuko and Aang went to the sun gods to actually learn natural firebending, because Zuko's firebending was built through rage, just because that's how his family was. Another realistic thing, by the way. They had to ingrain themselves in the culture. They saw two dragons swirling around them close up, and they had to learn the actual dance, which looks very, very similar to the fusion dance if you watch Dragon Ball Z. Why? It's probably because it's from the same culture. When Aang and Zuko had to learn natural firebending and pull from it from the source, oh, that tells you, okay, this is how firebending is supposed to be. And again, when we're talking about cultures, different cultures learn different ways. And a great example of that, obviously, the best example, is the first teachers of each element and how the humans had to learn. So for earthbending, the first earthbenders were badger moles. And we saw with Toph, badger moles can't see, but they dig through the earth. They're unmoving. And we saw that's why Toph is goated, if you didn't know. Toph learned from the source. And we saw in Avatar, I think this was a really good theme, that when you learn from the source, more likely than not, you would become goated. Or your bending ability was just naturally more fundamental. which doesn't necessarily mean you're better, but it means I think it means you have the potential to be the best at it or be one of the greats. We saw Toph. Toph is untouchable in earthbending. It's over. You can't touch Toph's earthbending ability. Toph learned it from the Badger Moles. The first waterbenders learned it from the moon. Now, we didn't really see anyone directly learn from the moon in the series, but we saw people get energy, or we saw people get power from the moon. And who were the people we saw? Katara, who's the best waterbender ever. That's just straight up facts. And Hama. We're talking about a person who was basically forced to have to become more in tune with the elements because she was in prison for years. Who was the first firebender? Dragons. We see how the Fire Nation, a lot of them tend to be, and because of that, once they got the power to, bend, they hunted dragons, and it was almost celebrated. Like, oh, I killed a dragon. I'm tough now. The first airbenders were Sky Bison. Like Appa, yeah, him. The first ones. And obviously the airbenders were more in tune with, the natures and elements, which is why all people from the air nomads could airbend. Every other tribe had people that sometimes either they can't do it or something, they weren't able to do it. Sokka's for the water tribe, he can't bend. And I gotta talk about this real quick, right? Because this is a potential video I've been thinking about for a minute. And it's basically about long running anime versus short running anime. And what are the differences, what are the pros and cons? And I think that when talking about anime or series, short running series or anime have the potential to be higher scaled or more goated, if you will, because shorter running anime tend to have their end goal in sight. When you have an anime like, I'm going to say Naruto, because I talk about Naruto on my channel. I've had 2 videos about Naruto. When you're talking about an anime like Naruto, the ending goal, you can see at points the ending goal was not as much in sight as, maybe it should have been, right? Like, did they have the war arc planned out in the tuning exams? No. They didn't. They just did it. That's fine, but they did not. Whereas when you look at a show like, a shorter show, like Avatar, we knew from the beginning what the ending goal is. The ending goal is to beat Ozai. And not only that, we knew how it had to be done. Roku told us straight up, Aang, you gonna have to master the 4 elements before summer's end. You good? Alright, cool. You got fix it for my problem. That was my mistake, by the way. So we knew what the goal was. We knew what had to happen, and we knew Aang needed 3 teachers. And I think that it's not necessarily the better way to make series, but it makes series a lot less convoluted. Because we knew what was going to happen there, and because of that, there were not, needless fillers and stuff like that. Avatar really doesn't have a lot of crazy fillers. There's one episode that all Avatar fans know is probably their least favorite episode. The pacing was pretty much always top notch. Every episode either had the story progressing, something important, or something built up to become important. Obviously, The Great Divide, that episode didn't have any of those, points. It didn't push the story much. It didn't, build towards anything. It didn't have an important plot point later on to be solved. But that's fine though. Shows, anime especially, have filler. That's just how things work. And even when you felt like it didn't have an importance, like the Tales of Iroh episode. The Tales of Iroh episode, for the most part, it seems rather very fillery because it's kind of just Iroh going through the day, helping people out, and it's like, okay, this is kind of random. But at the end, one, we found out it was a tribute to Mako, who was the voice of Iroh, the original one, rest in peace, obviously. And it was also a tribute to Iroh's son. And that doesn't necessarily push the plot forward, obviously, but it helped Iroh's character, because up until then, we knew that Iroh was a bad guy at one point. But we knew, obviously, that his son died. We knew that when Azula said it. But it really helped complete to let us know how much that meant to him, right? Because, maybe in other anime, they might drop that nugget, and we're told he cares about his son, but it's like we don't see it. But that episode was literally to show that Iroh's going through this crazy trauma and this struggle of not having a son, and he still is the same bright Iroh that shines through the night. Every episode, always helping people. And that episode was to show that. At the end, he was basically having he was having almost like a funeral, not a funeral, but having almost like a service for his son. When we're talking about a series, but more importantly, comparing it to anime, if you don't box, you really can't hold up. But don't worry, do not worry. In Avatar, they boxed. When we're talking about fighting, it obviously matters what type of fighting you're talking about, because there's a spectrum there. Do you want to see more Luffy versus Arlong, which is just pretty much martial arts or boxing? Or do you want to see Goku versus Cell, which is a lot more bigger scale? It's blast, explosions, all that stuff. Avatar was a lot more simpler, and they did that for a very important reason. They very clearly broadcast each culture, because each bending style was based off of a culture and a fighting style. So because of that, there's no huge explosions and stuff. Look at a fight like Aang versus Zuko versus Azula. That was a really, really fun fight. They're using their power system, right? There was airbending, a lot of it, and there's firebending. But it's still, you can still see the martial arts in each attack. You can see how Aang and Toph fight differently, like I said earlier. And because it was so simple, it allowed for the fighting to portray things. It might portray lessons or parallels. It allowed the viewers to look a little bit more deeper into the fights. Look at Aang versus Admiral Zhao. This is around the time when Aang is, the first time when he was trying to learn firebending, because he tried to learn firebending first. We find out that Aang's, the master, the firebender that's teaching Aang firebending, John, taught Admiral Zhao firebending. And one comment he made was that he was a great student, he was really good, but he always let his anger overcome him. And that is important to note, because in that fight, Aang says, okay, I see you fight really aggressively. I'm going to taunt you, and I'm going to fight like an airbender. I'm going to evade you. And you fight with the most dangerous element by far. We see it's fire. Fire can naturally keep on going. You leave a rock down. Leave a rock for 2 hours. Do it. Go ahead, do it. Just pause it. You can do it right now. The rock's not going to move. You see, it's not going to move. Fire keeps on growing and growing and takes in the air. So as a firebender, you have to have a lot more control and patience when using fire. And Admiral Zhao did not always have that. We see in that battle, the reason why Aang's able to basically escape is because he basically is just senselessly attacking, and he gets in the whole forest area that they were fighting in gets covered in fire. That's using the fight scene to portray the lesson. Now, maybe you want to see boxing, you just want to see boxing. That's fine. Avatar has just boxing when you don't need to look at things in depth. When you look at things in depth, it really makes the overall experience so much higher. My favorite example is Zuko versus Azula. Now, when I said Zuko versus Azula just now, I bet you thought of a fight. You probably weren't thinking of the fight I was talking about, because I was talking about all of them. Zuko and Azula fight 3 times. Pay attention to those 3 fights. You probably go back and watch them right now. In those 3 fights, we can see in the first battle, Zuko versus Azula, Azula smoked Zuko. She beats him without even bending. She didn't even use bending, and she beat him when he was firebending. Crushed. The second battle, it's a lot closer. In fact, I'd say that's a tie, because if you look at it at the end, they use their bending and they both get pushed back. Zuko gets saved by Appa and Team Avatar, and Azula saves herself. We see that's a nice little parallel. In the last fight, Azula's off her game, but Zuko smokes her. What is that trying to say? Throughout the series, as Zuko changes, gets better, gets smarter, learns himself, the tide of the battle between him and Azula slowly shifts in his favor. And while obviously Azula went cuckoo, he still won that fight, or he was going to win that fight. So when looking at Avatar fights, there was always more than just a fight. There was more to it. Azula versus Zuko, the reason I brought that up is because, in my opinion, that's the best fight in the series. It stood for so much, obviously, right? We see the impact of it, because if you look at the series, the whole series is about Zuko and his family, right? It's about his family structure. And we know that Zuko's not going to fight Ozai, because that's not his mission. That's not what he's supposed to do. That's Aang's job. But Zuko has to fight. He has to get rid of this trauma. He has to put this in the bag. Who's the person that's really causing him all the trauma? Who's someone who he has to get past? Azula. And he gets past her. And he beats her. All of that incapitates the storytelling. The plot of the series is Aang is the Avatar, and the Avatar is someone who masters all 4 bending styles. And each Avatar has a different task to overcome depending on the overall structure, who's in power, all that stuff, and obviously the past Avatar's mistakes. Aang had a particularly raw deal because of Roku. Actually, because of a couple Avatars, but Roku's the main Avatar that caused him this strife. Because of Roku's actions in his past life with his brother, or someone who he always viewed as a brother, Aang had to take down the Fire Nation. But not only that, all the air nomads wiped out. Obviously, that causes a lot of strife and problems for Aang, and we see how Aang deals with them. But one thing that I think the story did really well is they told a lot of lessons in the middle, right? So because of the way the series was set up, we all are gonna see Firebenders, or the Fire Nation, is just pure evil. I mean, look at Zuko, evil. Ozai, evil. Azula, she's twisted. She's 14 and she's evil as I don't know what. But they went out of their way to tell you that no one is evil just because of where they are. There are good people in bad situations or bad areas, and there are bad people in good situations in good areas. It was right in plain sight with Iroh. Iroh is as pure-hearted as they come, and he's a part of the Fire Nation. He was going to be the Fire Lord, but obviously some extenuating circumstances stopped that from happening, but the case is still the case. When Aang, sees the story of Roku and Sozin, which is, my favorite episode. I'll talk about that, don't worry. When Aang sees what happens, and Toph comes to the conclusion that no matter how much kindness you give the Fire Nation, they're evil, Aang's like, whoa, hold on, that's not the conclusion that I think you should have came to. The conclusion that I think was correct is that, look at these two brothers, look at these two people who are basically brothers. They know each other since they were young, they were both people from the Fire Nation, they went two completely different paths. We're talking about the Avatar, who was pure, good of heart, all that stuff. And then, the sinister Firelord, and they had to fight. That builds the precedent for Zuko. Zuko, you did a lot of evil stuff, for sure. A lot of evil stuff. But you're not inherently evil. You're more of a victim of circumstance. You had a bad life, you had a bad father. You didn't have your mom for a good amount of your life. Or I won't say a good amount of your life. You didn't have your mother for a couple years now. And you had a wild, evil, manipulative sister. So for a while there, you lost your way. You had a moral compass that made sure you weren't led astray, but at the end of the day, it was your choice to make. You were choosing if you were going to be the good guy or the bad guy. It was always your choice. That's why the whole your mother's grandfather and your father's grandfather was so impactful, because at the end of the day, you decide what you're going to do. And Zuko decided, and he made the right decision, obviously. When Aang and Zuko see the stories of Roku and Sozin respectively, it is just so amazing because the build-up for it was impeccable. We're getting the same story in a slightly different perspective, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like Zuko says at the end, he's like, why you said that my great-grandfather died, or my great-great-grandfather died. Sozin's still alive. I know Sozin, he's still alive. But when Iroh breaks it down for him to find out that Roku was also his great-grandfather, and it really puts everything into perspective. Avatar got a big boom when it dropped on Netflix. I think it was about probably a year ago now. And I think that obviously helped Avatar's overall perception, because before then, people saw Avatar as that cool show I watched when I was like 8 or 9. It come back on Netflix and people are like, let's just watch it because we're in quarantine, and people see like, whoa, this show is super complex. Like this show, it tackles real world problems. We're talking about, pick a real world problem, they tackle them all. When you talk about loss, trauma, vengeance, forgiveness, like it just tackles it all. I'm talking about all this good. I have to talk about the cons. When you talk about the cons, we're getting kind of nitpicky. Honestly, for Avatar, the only con that I feel like that's really not nitpicky that I'm going to bring up is the ending. Now, I told you all this stuff about Avatar and everything great about it, but the ending, I didn't personally have a problem with it, but the complaints I've heard about the ending are valid. Now, the big part about Avatar was the moral compass, right? That was super interesting because Aang is this perfect moral compass, right? He can almost do no wrong in that sense. Aang is all about not killing things no matter what. There's always someone, you can always get better. Like no one's pure evil. The reason why he can't kill is because of the Air Nomad's teaching. Now we see later on when we see the past airbending Avatar, and she tells Aang, your teachings from the Nomads are good, but you have to. It would be selfish of you to not kill the Firelord because of this. Like you owe the world more than your teachings, and we see that. But the reason why Aang is stuck is because he's the last one. The show is called Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that Last Airbender part is important because Aang had a very huge burden on his shoulders, and that burden was that he was the only Airbender, and because of that, he felt like everything he did, people would see it. And that would be the representation of the entire Air Nomad. Everything all of their teachings, everything they've ever done. So if Aang's out here killing puppies, they weren't even puppies. If Aang is killing turtle puppies, because they always had the two animal thing. If Aang's killing turtle puppies, then people are gonna be like, dang, those are airbenders. They're merciless. They kill turtle puppies. So Aang had a a very unique struggle that no one pretty much had to deal with. So Aang struggled with what to do with against Ozai. I talked about that earlier. Aang didn't exactly know what he wanted to do. You can view the Lion Turtle as a bit of a cop-out in the sense that it basically allowed the story to conclude in a reasonable way without having that question be answered. That question that was set up for pretty much the whole series. There are two directions. There are two paths. Left is kill the Firelord, and right is let him live. But if you let him live, you run the risk of him killing either you or someone you know, or causing more damage. Are you going to beat him up and jail him? The thing with firebenders is you can't really jail them for real. Unless you want to put them in like a place, we're talking about like a really cold place. There's a jail like that. But for the Firelord, it probably won't hold him. And we were deprived of that answer for sure. We didn't get to see Aang make that decision. Even though I think that we all pretty much know that Aang was not going to kill the Firelord under any circumstances. No ifs, ands, or buts. We just knew. In the battle, Aang had a chance to kill him. He was in the Avatar state and he didn't kill him. So it's pretty clear. Aang doesn't kill. So we knew that wasn't going to happen. But that is a con I have to bring up because that takes away from the series. Like that is a point. Like if we're talking about, if that's a score sheet, that's -1, -2 for Avatar. But besides that, Avatar, I think it's as perfect as you can get in a normal series. Avatar's Case for Go, to me, it's just the world building, the characters, and just what the series stood for. What the series tried to tell its viewers and its audience. When Avatar wanted to make you know, or when Avatar wanted to tell you of a lesson, it told you that lesson in a really unique way. So shout out Avatar, shout out all the creators of Avatar, shout out the writer of Avatar. I think there's some side Avatar stuff coming out soon, so check that out. I'm not sure if it's by the original writers, with the creators in it, so obviously it's probably gonna be banging. But let me know what y'all think down below. But I'm out, so peace.